The horse moved in silence across the dawn-bathed plains, hooves muffled by the dry sand and whispering sage. A soft wind tugged at the hem of her dress, and the long coat wrapped tight around the man in front. They rode as one, her arms around his waist, cheek pressed to his back. The sun had barely crested the line of the earth, and already the world shimmered with heat and dust. He hadn't spoken in nearly an hour. Neither had she. The land was vast, open, unforgiving, a golden sea broken by buttes and skeleton mesquites, but behind them it was far crueler. Back where town folk smiled too wide, and one man named Cutter Dade smiled the widest of them all. Clara hadn't known what fear was until she saw kindness twisted into possession, charm masked as a claim. But she had run, and the man she clung to now, Gray, they called him. He didn't ask why. He just helped her up onto his horse. Gray was older, mid-40s perhaps. Hair sun-bleached at the tips, face lined like weathered leather, voice used rarely, and only when needed. He didn't carry the smell of whiskey like the others. He smelled like dust and iron and maybe pine. Clara had never met anyone who made silence feel like shelter. But even shelter couldn't outrun men, like Cutter for long. Her dress, once white, was streaked with dirt and torn at the sleeve. The bruise on her cheek had gone yellow-blue now. Still, her spine stayed straight behind him. Her grip never faltered. Gray rode hard, fast, but he wasn't reckless. His eyes never stopped moving, always scanning, always reading wind, sky, and distant movement like it was a language he understood better than speech. They came upon a thin stream, not long after the sun had climbed higher. The horse needed water. So did they. Clara slid off first, boots crunching dry twigs, and knelt at the bank, cupping her hands. Gray didn't kneel. He stood facing the hills. "You feel it," he said low. She froze. Her hands trembled. She didn't know what it was, but she felt it. Then the sound came, horses. 5 of them. They emerged like wraiths from the dust, 5 silhouettes against the morning haze, guns slung low and eyes darker than the sun would allow. One of them smirked and called out, "Ain't this sweet?" 1 horse, 1 runaway preacher's girl, and 1 tired old man. Clara stood slowly. She didn't look at Gray, but she edged closer, behind him. The man in the lead, broad-shouldered, gold tooth gleaming, swung off his saddle and approached like a wolf testing boundaries. Gray didn't move. His hands stayed loose at his sides. "We're not looking for trouble," Gray said. "That's so," the man laughed. "'Cause Cutter's looking for you, and I reckon $1,000 says we found you." He stepped closer. Clara flinched. Gray shifted just enough to shield her. "I'll ask you boys once," Gray said, voice like gravel. "Turn your horses and ride the other way." "You'll ask us." Another rider barked a laugh. "Hell, he's polite. Maybe we ought to ask your girl here how polite he really is." Clara felt it before it happened. The gold-toothed man reached out quick, slapped her hard across the face. The sting exploded white-hot. She staggered. Gray didn't raise his voice, didn't shout. He simply moved. The second outlaw, taller, younger, had leaned from his saddle, reaching to yank Clara away. That was a mistake. In a single, blur-fast motion, Gray stepped in, twisted, and pulled a short blade from his boot. He didn't stab. He didn't slash. He cut swift and precise, slicing the outlaw's saddle strap. The man toppled backward, limbs flailing as the horse bucked and the dust swallowed him. Gun hands twitched, but Gray was already between Clara and the gang. "Next hand raised dies," he said. Nobody moved. Dust curled around them, suspended in the morning heat. The knife in Gray's hand caught the light, bone-handled, worn down at the grip, not a new tool, but one clearly used with purpose. The gold-toothed man's expression soured. He spat into the dirt. "You ain't got a gun out." "Don't need one," Gray said. "Not yet." One rider leaned forward, whispering. Something about his tone changed the tension. The gold tooth glinted again, but this time without humor. "Ain't worth it," he muttered. "We'll tell Cutter we saw you, that you're running scared." Gray's eyes didn't blink. "Tell him we ain't running. Tell him we're riding. Toward him." The gang turned, reluctantly, eyes like knives in retreat. The last one to leave was the one who tried to grab Clara. He climbed back onto his horse without a word, rubbing his ribs, glaring at the woman who had not screamed. Clara stood straight, blood on her lip, hand tight on the strap of Gray's saddle. Her breath was shallow, but her eyes were steady. Once they were gone, she looked at Gray. "You didn't draw your gun." "Didn't need to," he said. She wiped her mouth, her voice dry. "Why do you talk like that? Like you already know how this ends." Gray's gaze was far off again. The wind had shifted. "Because I've seen how stories like this end," he said. "And the only way they don't is if we change the ending ourselves." They mounted again, her arms once more around his waist. But something between them had shifted. It wasn't safety she felt anymore. It was trust. Not the fragile kind born of rescue, but the harder kind, the forged kind. The kind made when the only thing between you and the devil is the man you're riding with. As they rode away, the sun rose higher, burning off the mist, painting the desert red. Behind them, the hoof prints stretched like scars across the land. And in front of them, vengeance rode quietly. Dead Elk Ridge wasn't much more than a fading memory of hope scattered across dry timber and chipped paint. Just a few wooden buildings crouched beneath the hills, a church with a broken bell, and one saloon that never closed, even on Sundays. The streets were dust, and the air always tasted like something had burned long ago and never stopped smoldering. Clara used to walk those streets with her head held high and her father's Bible clutched to her chest. Folks called her preacher's girl, polite, soft-spoken, not made for the grit of frontier life, they'd say. But Clara had iron in her spine, even if no one looked close enough to see it. Her father taught her that, taught her to listen more than she spoke, to read the world like scripture, and to never smile for a devil just because he wore boots and manners. Cutter Dade wore both. He came into town like a shadow riding daylight, sharp suit, perfect teeth, and a voice that sounded like he meant every word even when he didn't. The saloon girls whispered his name like a warning. The sheriff stayed behind his desk when Cutter rode in. He wasn't old, maybe 30, maybe less, but he carried the kind of danger that made men forget age and remember fear. Clara caught his eye the day she turned down his drink offer in the middle of the general store. He smiled, charming as summer, and said, "You always this bold in the presence of a gentleman?" She answered with quiet steel, "I haven't seen a gentleman yet." From that moment, Cutter Dade wanted her, not with love, not even lust. He wanted ownership, possession, and men like him didn't like being told no. It started small. Roses on her doorstep, coins slipped to townsfolk to pass along compliments. A piano tune played outside her window at night. Then came the threats, veiled at first, then not at all. He said he'd wait. Said she'd come to him. Said women like her always did in the end. She never did. The night he broke into her house, the wind was howling so loud, she almost didn't hear the door crack. She was in her nightgown, barefoot on the wooden floor, heart beating too loud in the silence that followed. He stepped in like he owned the walls. A silver ring on his hand caught the candlelight. "You don't know what I can give you," he said. She picked up the fire poker. "I don't want it," she said. He laughed. Then, from the back shadows of her kitchen, another voice answered. Calm, deep, not surprised. She said no. Clara hadn't even seen him come in. Gray stepped forward, just a man in a trail coat and a worn hat, unarmed, quiet-eyed. Cutter turned, grinning wide like a man used to winning. "You know who I am." "I do. You gonna stop me?" "No," Gray said slow. "You already stopped yourself." Cutter looked confused. Then the fire poker clattered to the ground, and Clara realized Gray had taken it from her without either of them noticing. Cutter reached for his gun. He didn't draw it. Gray didn't punch, didn't pull a blade. He simply moved. A twist, a step, a grip behind the wrist, and Cutter's arm hit the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. The gun fell. Cutter howled. Gray leaned in close, eyes like winter. "There's faster men than you buried for better reasons. Don't dig your own grave just because you don't like being told no." Then he let go. Cutter stumbled out the door with blood on his hand and rage in his mouth. That night, Clara sat across from Gray at her father's empty dinner table. She poured tea with shaking hands, not speaking for a long time. He didn't touch the cup. Finally, she asked, "Why did you help me?" Gray's eyes were on the flame of the oil lamp. "I've done wrong," he said quietly, "but I know what right is." He stood before she could answer, walked out like he hadn't come to stay. But something in Clara shifted, broke loose, and started breathing. Maybe she should have locked the door. Maybe she should have cried. But she didn't. The next morning, Cutter's men came riding. They burned her father's sermon notes in the yard, said they'd come back for her, said she was now claimed. She rode hard to the edge of town, where the hills swallowed the sun and no one dared follow. Gray was there, already mounted. He didn't look surprised to see her. "They'll come for me," she said. He nodded once. "I don't want to be who I was." "You're not," Gray said. "You're becoming someone you were always meant to be." That was all. They rode on the same horse, her behind him, arms wrapped not in fear, but in choice. Her dress torn, her hair unbound, her voice newly sharp. The wind wasn't just behind them now, it was inside her. Cutter Dade swore vengeance. He sent his riders out, 5 at first, 10 later. Word spread through the territory that Clara had been stolen by a ghost of a man with no past and nothing to lose. But the story wasn't true. She hadn't been stolen. She had run. And Gray, he didn't steal. He didn't even stay in one place long enough to be noticed. No one knew where he came from or what weight he carried beneath that coat. But there was something in the way he looked at the world, like he'd seen it fall apart once and was waiting for it to do so again. One of Cutter's men was family. Hank, her cousin. Half wild, half scared. He'd always run with the wrong boys. But when Clara saw him again, eyes flickering between loyalty and command, something cracked in her chest. He didn't speak when they passed him on the ridge. Didn't raise his gun. But he didn't lower it either. She remembered his words from years ago, before he joined Cutter's circle. "The world ain't good or bad, Clara. Just hot or cold. And we all burn, one way or another." Now she wondered which fire he was walking into. Every town they passed through after that watched them with wary eyes. Some saw a fugitive. Some saw a victim. But a few, just a few, saw the truth. Two souls stitched together not by romance, not even by fate, but by something older. Justice. Survival. Vengeance, maybe. Gray never asked her to ride with him. She just stayed. And in that staying, she changed. She learned how to read the land like a map written in color and sound. Learned how to load a revolver without fumbling. Learned how to speak only when it mattered. And when it did, to speak like thunder. Sometimes, around the fire, she'd look at Gray and ask about who he used to be. He never answered directly. Only once did he say something close. "You ever kill someone?" she asked. Gray's face was in shadow. The stars were bright, endless above them. "I've ended things that needed ending," he said. Clara didn't ask again. Somehow that was enough. The days ahead were already carved into dust and blood. She knew it. He knew it. Cutter Dade wouldn't stop. He'd find them. He'd bring the law with him or twist it to his will. But Clara wasn't the preacher's daughter anymore. She was riding with a man who understood the price of silence and the value of a clean shot. And for the first time, she didn't feel afraid of what was coming. She felt ready. The canyons swallowed their shadows before the sun could. Jagged walls of red stone rose like cathedral walls, their faces cut by centuries of wind and sun. Echoes clung to the rocks, whispers of things lost and long dead. Clara hated the silence it carried, the way even a breath seemed too loud. But Gray said it was the best place to disappear. No one with sense followed strangers into canyon country without leaving pieces of themselves behind. They rode slow now. The horse was limping, just slightly, favoring its front right. Clara had tied what remained of her scarf to its ankle 2 days ago, but it wasn't healing fast. They were low on food. The last drop of water had been passed between them that morning. Neither spoke of it. Neither complained. Gray was quieter than usual, if that was possible. His skin had gone pale beneath the sunburn, his voice rough with dryness. He scanned every ridge, every sliver of sky above the canyon rim, but even he was starting to look worn. Clara studied his face each time they stopped. The lines were deeper now, cut sharper by hunger and whatever haunted him. The fire they made that night was barely more than a flicker, just enough to keep away the chill, not enough to be seen. Clara sat with her back to the rock wall, one hand resting on Gray's pistol. He'd let her keep it now, without comment. That said more than words. Around midnight, she heard movement. A crunch. A slide of gravel. She stood silently, lifted the pistol with both hands, arms trembling but steady. Gray was asleep, or so she thought. The shadow emerged from behind a narrow outcrop, no more than a silhouette. A tall figure, slow, steady. She cocked the hammer. The figure stopped. "Put it down, white flower," came the voice, deep, calm, not in English. "Apache." Gray sat up, coughing once. "She won't shoot," he said. Clara didn't lower the pistol. Not yet. The man stepped closer, and the firelight caught his face. Copper skin, face lined with dust and age, feathers tied behind one ear. He held no weapon, only the weight of something ancient in his gaze. "I thought you were dead," the man said to Gray. "Not yet," Gray answered. Clara finally lowered the gun. The man's name was Chalky. He had known Gray once, long before Dead Elk Ridge, long before Clara had even heard of Cutter Dade. They spoke in soft voices, strange words Clara didn't know, until Gray finally translated for her. "He says we're being followed," Gray muttered, "by the white man who smells like iron and lilac." Clara blinked. "That's Cutter." Chalky nodded, amused. "He wears scent like a woman," he said in English. "You can smell him before you see him. Even the animals avoid him." Gray chuckled, and it was the first time she had heard real laughter from him since they left town. But it faded quick. "We can't stay long," Gray said. Chalky gestured to the shadows. "One night. There is food. There is water. Then you vanish." It felt like a dream, the way the canyon opened to receive them. Hidden paths through stone led to a camp, small, hidden under a cliff overhang, invisible from above. Smoke curled upward like a prayer that had no destination. The people there said little. They didn't ask questions. They simply offered meat, water, shelter. An old woman washed Clara's hands without a word. A boy no older than 8 gave her a blanket. She thanked them all without knowing the right words. Later, as they sat together beneath a sky so black it felt alive, Gray told her the rest. "Years back," he said, "I rode with men who killed without reason. Thought I could change them from inside. Thought I could draw the line for them." "You couldn't," Clara said. He shook his head. "One night, we raided a camp like this. I warned them, but not fast enough. Some died anyway. One of them was Chalky's brother." Clara's breath caught. "I carried him out," Gray continued. "Didn't save him, but he didn't die alone." She said nothing. There wasn't anything to say. Chalky approached then, knelt beside them, his eyes fixed on Gray. "You are different now," he said, "but the blood you carry still speaks." Gray didn't argue. The stars bled silver across the sky. The canyon moaned with wind. When the attack came, it started with silence. Then a scream. Then gunfire. Clara bolted upright. Flames burst from a tent nearby. Shouts echoed. Horses whinnied. She saw shadows moving fast across the walls of the canyon. Too many. Cutter's men. Gray grabbed his rifle, coughing violently. He was slower, the exhaustion catching up. Clara fired her first shot without thinking. The crack split the night wide open. One rider fell from the ledge above. She'd aimed high, hoping just to scare, but she hit true. Her hands were shaking. She looked down at them, stunned. No time to process. Gray stumbled to the rocks, taking cover. He shot once, twice, hit one in the chest. But then a bullet tore through his side. He grunted, fell back, blood spreading across his shirt. "Gray!" She reached him, dragged him behind the rocks. His face was pale, teeth clenched. "Go," he rasped. "No," she snapped. He tried to push her away, but his strength was gone. Clara yanked the pistol from his belt and turned toward the next shadow. She fired again. Missed, but they ducked. She took his arm, pulled him up. They moved together, staggering, weaving, crawling through the chaos. Chalky was yelling in his native tongue, leading his people deeper into the maze of stone. Clara followed, dragging Gray with everything she had. His blood left a trail. Her dress was soaked with it. The fire behind them lit the canyon walls with hellish light. A shot cracked close. Stone shattered near her head. Clara didn't stop. She screamed pure, wordless rage and kept pulling. They climbed a narrow rise, slipping, scrambling. Her knees bled. Gray coughed blood onto the rocks. When they reached the top, the fire was just a distant flicker. Clara collapsed beside him, panting, throat raw. She pressed her hand to his wound. He winced but smiled barely. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "So are you," he murmured. "Shut up," she said, voice cracking. "You're not dying." He didn't answer. She pressed harder on the wound, tears streaming now. "I am not carrying your ghost through this canyon, Gray. You got me out of hell. Now it's your turn." His hand found hers, weak but still warm. "You shot that bastard clean," he said, eyes fluttering. "I'll shoot 10 more if I have to." The stars wheeled above them, indifferent. Somewhere behind them, the dying fire crackled like a final warning. But ahead, beyond the canyon, beyond the blood, there was only darkness and the sound of her breath, steady and alive. She wasn't the one being rescued anymore. She was the one who'd stayed, who fought, who bled, who pulled a dying man up a wall of stone just to keep the story going. And whatever came next, she'd meet it with fire in her chest and steel in her hands. The mining town had once been called Mercy Gulch, but even the wind didn't whisper that name anymore. The mine collapsed 5 years back. Now, only hollow buildings leaned against each other like drunks at the edge of a bar fight. Windows broken, doors swinging in the desert breeze. And silence, thick, watchful, like the place was holding its breath. Clara guided the limping horse through the bone-dry main street. Gray slumped behind her, half-conscious, arms around her waist like dead weight. She'd found the shack on the edge of town, half buried in sagebrush and rust. One wall was missing. The roof leaked. But it was hidden, and that was enough. She dragged Gray inside, laid him on the dusty cot, and stitched him up by lantern light. She didn't flinch when he bled, didn't look away when he groaned in pain. She only worked, steady as any field medic, her hands raw but precise. He slipped in and out of fevered sleep. When he moaned her name, she held his hand and whispered promises she didn't know she believed. On the 3rd day, while he slept, she searched the abandoned sheriff's office for bandages. The desk drawer was jammed. She forced it open. The paper inside was brittle, yellowing. A wanted poster. Her breath caught in her chest. The sketch was older, the lines harsher, but it was him, Gray, only not Gray. The name below read, Thomas Grayburn. $1,000. Dead or alive. Crimes: murder, treason, desertion, armed insubordination against federal justice. She read it again, and again. Then she folded it and walked back to the shack, with fire boiling in her blood. He was awake when she returned, propped against the wall, trying to drink water with a shaky hand. His eyes met hers before she spoke. "I found it," she said. He didn't ask what. She tossed the poster into his lap. He stared at it a long moment, expression unreadable. Finally, he folded it again and tucked it under his thigh. "I figured you'd see it eventually." Her voice cracked. "Is it true?" He nodded once. "I was a hired gun once. Got paid to track men, put him in the ground. Then I started picking who I took. Only the ones who deserved it. Men who hurt children. Women. The kind of men the law liked to protect." She didn't blink. "One of them was a judge," he said. "Used his bench like a throne. Bought a girl, 12. Called it marriage. No one dared touch him. So I did." She sat down across from him. "And that made you a villain." "They said I'd gone rogue," he said. "But I hadn't. I just stopped doing their killing." For a long while, neither of them spoke. Then Clara said, "I would have done the same." Gray looked at her then, really looked. "That's why I kept riding with you," he said. "You've got that kind of justice in you. The kind that doesn't blink." She wanted to be angry, wanted to scream at him for not telling her sooner. But all she felt was tired. Tired of good men being called outlaws. Tired of devils like Cutter wearing clean boots and silk ties. Later that day, she ventured into town for supplies. A one-eyed shopkeeper ran a dry goods store out of an old saloon. He barely looked at her, just bagged her salt, flour, jerky. Behind the bar, half covered in dust, a second copy of that same wanted poster hung crooked on the wall. Clara felt cold settle in her gut. The town had seen Gray's face, and someone had already noticed. Back in the shack, she sat beside him, handed him a piece of bread, and said, "We've got maybe 2 days before someone sells your name." He chewed slowly. "Won't be the first time. But it might be the last," she said. That night, they posted no fire. They kept quiet. Gray sharpened a knife with slow, deliberate motions. Clara cleaned the pistol like she'd done it her whole life. Just after midnight, a knock tapped against the rotting doorframe. Gray's hand went to his sidearm. Clara stood. The voice was familiar. "It's me," Hank said. "I came alone." Gray nodded once. "Let him in." Hank stepped into the flickering lantern glow. Hands open, no gun drawn. His face was windburned, his boots cracked, and he looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "You followed us," Clara said. "I tracked Cutter," Hank replied. "He's 2 days behind. Maybe less." Gray stared hard at him. "Why warn us?" Hank's eyes shifted to Clara. "Because I'm done watching him destroy everything. You were always like a sister to me. Before all this." Her voice was sharp. "But you rode with him anyway." "I thought he was the future," Hank said. "But he's just rot wearing skin." He looked at Gray then. "I came to help you both get out." Gray's eyes narrowed. "That bounty's still good. You planning to collect?" "I ain't here for the money," Hank muttered. "But I'm not a saint. I don't know what I'm doing. I just know I want out." His gaze lingered on Clara too long. Not lustful, but not brotherly either. A kind of longing that made Gray sit up straighter. "You ever touched her?" Gray said, low and steady. "I'll carve that hand off slow." "I ain't that man," Hank snapped. "Not yet," Gray replied. Tension filled the shack like smoke. Then Hank dropped his eyes. "I'm staying nearby," he said. "You want my help? I'll be at the North Ridge at dawn." He turned and left. The shack was quiet again. Clara exhaled. "You believe him?" "No," Gray said, "but I believe he believes himself." She didn't sleep much that night. Every sound made her fingers twitch toward the pistol, and in the last hours before dawn, she stepped outside to find Gray already watching the horizon. "He'll bring them," she said. "Maybe," Gray said, "but it won't matter. He's not the threat." She glanced at him. "You've seen what happens when people get scared," Gray said. "They stop asking questions. They hang who they're told to." The wind stirred her hair. "I ain't scared," she said. "I know." And when the sun cracked the sky and painted the canyon gold again, it found Clara already saddled, pistol at her hip, watching the trail with eyes that didn't blink. The wind came first, brushing the dust off the dead mining town like fingers over old bones. Then the silence shifted, too clean, too still, and Gray knew. Cutter was here. He saw them through a crack in the wall, riders moving slow, surrounding the shack like vultures in formation. No shouting, no gunfire yet, just menace in the shape of saddles and rifles. Clara was beside him, breath steady, her eyes locked on the horizon like she could see the end already. Gray touched her arm. "You don't have to." "I do," she said, tightening the leather strap on her holster. "We finish this." She didn't wait for permission, just threw the saddle over the horse and climbed up like she was born in war. Her rifle lay across her lap, but she didn't raise it. She rode out slow, the dust swallowing her, drawing Cutter's attention like a torch in a cave. From the opposite side of the shack, Gray gritted his teeth and limped through the back door, dragging his body behind cover. His ribs screamed, but the pistol in his grip felt familiar, righteous. He crouched low beside a crumbling wall and waited for the right sound. It came a heartbeat later, the sharp crack of a rifle, not Clara's. Then another. He raised his head and saw Hank, half hidden behind an abandoned wagon, smoking revolver in hand. One of Cutter's men was down, blood blooming in the dirt. Hank fired again, but didn't get the third shot off. A bullet caught him square in the chest. He dropped like a man who never expected to die that morning. The gang scattered in confusion. That was all Gray needed. He moved. One shot to the man behind the water trough, down. Another in the shadow near the corral, gone. His breath came short, vision blurry, but his hand didn't waver. He was no longer the ghost. He was the storm. Through the rising dust, Clara dismounted, walking toward Cutter's horse. Her boots left soft prints in the dirt. Cutter smiled from the saddle, like a man who'd already decided how the story ended. "You really think you're gonna kill me, girl?" he asked. "You think that pretty little hand won't tremble?" Her pistol was already raised, both hands steady. Cutter dismounted slow, easy, his hands empty. He took 2 steps forward, that smile never leaving. "I remember what you were," he said. "Dead Oak Ridge's little preacher's girl. Always saying no like it meant something." She flinched, but only for a second. "Thing is," he said, circling, "I see it in you now. The rage. You're more like me than him." Clara's voice was calm. "You tried to make me something I wasn't. I tried to make you strong. You tried to break me." Her finger curled around the trigger. "This," she said, "is for the girl you tried to make me." The shot rang out across the canyon like thunder against stone. Cutter staggered, hands clutching his chest as he sank to his knees. One last grin flickered on his lips before he fell, face first, into the dust. Gray reached her just as the smoke cleared. She was still holding the pistol, arms stiff. He took it from her gently. "It's over," he said. "No," Clara whispered. "It's just beginning." They buried Hank just past the edge of town, where the sagebrush grew thick and the coyotes wouldn't dig. Gray lowered the body himself, jaw tight, pain in every limb. Clara found a piece of wood, carved his name with Gray's knife, and pressed it into the dirt. She stood in silence, eyes glassy but dry. "He didn't die good," she said. Gray lit a fire that night beside the grave. They said nothing for a long time, listening to the wind whistle through broken beams. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out the wanted poster, creased and weathered like his own bones. He held it to the flame. It curled, blackened, and vanished into sparks. They didn't speak about what came next. They saddled the same horse at dawn. Gray in front, Clara behind him, arms wrapped gently around his waist. The sunrise cracked over the canyon, all red gold and silence, like the world itself had held its breath until justice was done. The wind carried whispers through the dying town as they rode out. They say he was a ghost with a gun, and she was the fire that gave him a reason to haunt the wicked. Together, they rode not to run, but to reckon.